The city of Chicago in November had a particular cruelty to it. The wind did not simply blow through the streets. It cut through them, finding every gap in a coat, every exposed inch of skin, and reminding anyone foolish enough to be outside that the lake did not care about their plans or their problems. Lora Vault had stopped noticing years ago. She tied her apron behind her back, tucked a fresh notepad into her front pocket, and pushed through the glass door of the Copper Spoon at 5:45 in the morning. The same way she had done for the past 3 years, the diner sat on the corner of Wacker and Monroe, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a mobile phone repair shop. It was not a fancy place. The booths were old red vinyl, patched in 2 places with black electrical tape. The coffee mugs had small chips along the rims that management never replaced. The floor tiles near the back corner had turned a shade of yellow that no amount of mopping could fix. But the food was honest, and the portions were real, and at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday was enough to fill every seat. Lora had the kind of face that people trusted immediately. Wide brown eyes, a small upturned nose, and the habit of listening to people like what they were saying actually mattered. She was 26 but looked slightly younger. And she moved through the diner with a quiet efficiency that made her seem like she had been doing this her whole life. In some ways, she had. She had started bussing tables at 15 to help her father after her mother left. She had never fully stopped. Connie Marsh was already behind the counter when Lora arrived. Pouring the first pot of the morning with one eye still half closed. Connie was 31, round-faced and loud, with a laugh that could be heard from the kitchen and a loyalty to Lora. Had never once wavered in 4 years of working side by side. "You look terrible," Connie said without looking up. "Thank you," Lora said. "My dad had a rough night." Connie finally looked at her. "How rough?" "He was up until 2 coughing. I sat with him until it passed." Lora hung her jacket on the hook by the staff bathroom and smoothed down her hair. "He keeps saying he is fine. He has been saying he is fine for 6 months. Connie set the coffee pot down and placed both hands on the counter. "You need to get him back to the doctor." "I know." Lora tied her hair back and picked up the first order pad of the day. "I have an appointment scheduled for next Thursday. If he will actually go this time." She did not say the other part out loud. She did not say that the last doctor visit had suggested tests she could not yet afford, or that the medical bill from 3 months ago was still sitting on the kitchen counter, because she had not been able to look at it without her chest tightening. She put it away inside herself the same way she put most hard things away, neatly and out of view, and got to work. The morning rush came and went the way it always did. Truck drivers and construction workers first. Then office employees grabbing coffee and toast before heading to the towers 2 blocks north. Lora moved between tables with her notepad and her easy smile, refilling cups before anyone had to ask, remembering that the man in booth 4 took his eggs over easy, and that the woman by the window was trying to cut back on sugar and always appreciated it when Lora brought the sweetener. Without being asked, it was nearly 9 when the door opened and a man walked in. Alone. Lora did not look up immediately. She was writing down an order for table 6, and she finished the sentence before she glanced over. When she did, she registered the basics the way she registered all new customers. Man alone. Well-dressed, not a regular. She pointed toward the open seats along the window without walking over, the way they did when the place was still full, and went back to table 6 to pick up the dishes. Harrison Blake stood just inside the doorway of the Copper Spoon and experienced something he had not experienced in a very long time. He was ignored. It was not a dramatic thing. No one told him to wait or waved him off or was rude to him. The woman in the apron simply looked over, noted his presence the way she might note that a new song had started on the radio, and went back to what she was doing. He was, in that moment, entirely unremarkable to her. Just another person who needed a table. He was not used to that. Harrison Blake had built Blake Innovations from a tour room startup into a company worth $4.7 billion by the time he was 35. He had been featured on the covers of 3 national business magazines in the past 2 years. When he walked into rooms, people moved slightly. Not out of fear exactly, though that was sometimes part of it. More out of awareness. An instinct that something significant had entered the space. He had grown so accustomed to it that he had stopped noticing it consciously. Until now, when it was absent, he sat down at the window seat she had pointed to and picked up the laminated menu. It was the kind of menu with photographs, a little glossy, a little worn at the corners. He turned it over in his hands and looked at the options. He had not eaten at a place like this since he was in his 20s. Before everything changed, he had come this way by accident, more or less. His driver had been stuck in traffic 3 blocks east, some kind of accident near the bridge. And Harrison had told him to stay put and started walking. He had a board meeting at 10 that his assistant Daniel had been reminding him about since yesterday. He had 40 minutes and no breakfast, and there was something in the smell coming from this place. Butter and coffee and something warm that made him stop walking and push the door open. Lora appeared at his table without any particular ceremony. She set a mug down, poured coffee without asking whether he wanted it, and said, "Do you know what you want, or do you need a minute?" He looked up at her. She was already looking at her notepad, pen ready. "What is good here?" he asked. "Depends on what you are looking for. If you want something light, the oatmeal. If you want something that will actually keep you going, it's the short stack with the scrambled eggs and sausage on the side." "The second one," he said. She wrote it down. She did not smile at him in the particular way that people smiled at him when they recognized him. She did not make any comment about his coat or his watch. A Patek Philippe that his assistant had once told him could pay for a semester of college. She wrote the order down and walked away. Harrison Blake watched her move to the next table, and then turned to look out the window at the street. Something sat in his chest that he could not quite name. It was not quite curiosity. It was something closer to the feeling of turning a corner in a city you know well and finding a street you have never seen before. He ate the breakfast when it came. It was better than anything he had ordered from the hotel kitchen that week. He left a $40 bill on a $12 check and did not wait for the change. Outside, he called Daniel and told him he was on his way. His driver had cleared the traffic and was 2 minutes out. Harrison stood on the sidewalk and looked back through the glass window of the diner at the woman in the apron, who was already filling someone else's cup and laughing at something they had said, and thinking nothing at all about the man who had just left. He came back the next morning. He told himself it was the breakfast. He told himself it was the breakfast on the second morning, and the coffee on the third. And by the fourth morning, Harrison Blake stopped pretending. He needed a reason and simply walked through the door of the Copper Spoon at 8:55 and sat in the same window. See it, and waited for Lora Vault to appear with the coffee pot she always poured before asking. He had noticed that about her. She made decisions on behalf of the people around her based on observation rather than assumption. She was almost always right. The man in the corner booth got decaf after 10 because she had noticed his hands shaking once after a full cup. The elderly woman who came in on Wednesdays got her toast cut into triangles without being asked because she had mentioned once, months ago, judging by how casually Lora did it, that squares were harder to hold. These were small things. Harrison watched them and said nothing. On the fourth morning, she set his mug down and said, "You are going to need a loyalty card soon." He looked up. She was not smiling in a flirtatious way. She was stating a fact with a small amount of amusement behind it, the way you might speak to a neighbor whose cat kept ending up in your yard. "Do you actually have loyalty cards?" He asked. "No," she said. "But I could make you one out of a napkin if you keep showing up." She walked away before he could respond. He found himself smiling at the table, which was something Daniel would have found alarming had he been there to see it. Harrison had given Daniel a different address for his morning meetings this week. Not a lie exactly. More of an omission. His assistant was thorough and well-meaning and would have had questions that Harrison did not yet have answers to. So he said he was meeting someone in the West Loop and left it at that. Daniel had a gift for accepting explanations that were technically true, and Harrison had made use of it. He did not know what he was doing. That was the honest answer, and Harrison Blake was not a man who tolerated uncertainty in himself. His entire career had been built on the ability to read a situation clearly, decide on a course of action, and commit to it without looking back. He had pivoted Blake Innovations 3 times in 12 years. Each time when other people in the room were still arguing about the data. His instincts were the thing people talked about most when they talked about him. His instincts and the fact that he never let anything get close enough to distract him. He thought about Pamela. He did not think about her often anymore. Or rather, he had trained himself not to. Pamela Wright had come into his life 6 years ago when Blake Innovations was already successful, but not yet what it had become. She was brilliant and composed and devastatingly strategic. And for 2 years he had believed she was the kind of person you built something permanent with. They had been engaged for 4 months when he discovered that her affection for him had always been precisely proportional to his net worth, and that a rival company had been receiving information through her that had cost him close to $30 million and one significant contract. She had not apologized. She had looked at him across the table in the restaurant, where he had confronted her, with that particular composure she never lost, and said that business was business, and that she had assumed he understood that better than anyone. He had walked out without another word. He had not been in a relationship since. He understood, on some level, that this was the reason he kept coming back to the diner. Not just because of the breakfast or the coffee or the strange novelty of being treated like an ordinary person, but because Lora Vault looked at him and saw nothing she wanted from him, and that was the only version of being seen that felt safe. By the end of the second week, he had told her his name was Harry. She had asked on a Wednesday, the way you eventually ask anyone who keeps showing up somewhere. She had said it while writing down his order, not even looking up. What is your name anyway, since you clearly live here now? Harry, he said. She wrote it on the top of the order slip the way the staff apparently did for regulars. Harry, window seat. Short stack egg scrambled, sausage on the side. Laura, she said, pointing to the small name tag on her apron that he had already read 14 times. I know, he said. She raised an eyebrow, the first genuinely curious look she had given him. He realized his mistake immediately. Your name tag, he said. I read it the first day. She accepted this without suspicion and moved on. He exhaled slowly and turned back to the window. The truth was that Laura had known who he was by the end of the first week. Connie had figured it out on day 3. She had come into the back with her phone screen facing outward, showing Laura a photograph from a business magazine. Harrison Blake photographed on the roof of his company's Chicago headquarters. The skyline behind him, the same strong jaw and green eyes that had been sitting at the window seat ordering short stacks. Laura had looked at the photo and then looked through the pass-through window at the man eating his eggs and reading something on his phone. He told me his name was Harry, she said. Connie's eyes went wide. He gave you a fake name? She pressed both hands flat on the counter. Laura, that is textbook romantic hero behavior. That is a man who wants to be known for something other than his money. Or, it is a man who does not want to make conversation about Bloomberg articles while he eats his breakfast. Connie looked personally wounded by this interpretation. Laura said nothing to him about it. She could not have explained exactly why, except that it seemed important to let him have whatever this was. He came in every morning, and he sat alone, and he ate his food, and sometimes they talked for 3 or 4 minutes about nothing in particular. The weather, a road closure on Monroe, whether the Bears had any realistic hope this season. And he always looked slightly lighter when he left than when he had come in. That seemed like enough reason to leave things alone. She had her own complications to manage. Her father, Roger Vault, had been declining steadily since the previous spring. He was 61 years old and had spent 35 of those years working construction sites that had not been gentle to his lungs. The cough had started as something seasonal, then become something chronic, then become something that woke him at 2 in the morning and left both of them sitting at the kitchen table in the half-dark. Him trying to wave off her concern, and her trying not to show how frightened she was. The appointment that Thursday confirmed what she had quietly suspected. The pulmonologist used words she had to look up on her phone on the bus ride home. She sat in the back row with her coat pulled around her and read the definitions on a medical website, and then sat very still for the rest of the ride. Watching the city move past the window, when she got home, Her father was in the kitchen making soup. He was wearing the old blue cardigan he had owned since before she was born, and he had the radio on low, and he looked, in that moment, so ordinary and so dear that she had to stop in the doorway. "Well," he said, turning from the stove. "They want to do more tests," she said. "Nothing is certain yet." He nodded and turned back to the soup. "Lora," he said. "I raised you to be straight with me," she told him the honest version. He listened without interrupting, stirring the soup slowly. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "All right. We figure it out." "We have always figured it out," she nodded and set her bag down and went to wash her hands, because she needed something ordinary to do with her body, while everything inside her. "Are you Keat?" The next morning at the Copper Spoon she was quieter than usual. Not rude, never that, but slightly elsewhere. Connie noticed and said nothing, which was its own kind of kindness. Harrison noticed too. He did not say anything at first. He ate his breakfast and watched her move between tables and saw that the easy quality she usually carried, that sense of being completely at home in the work, was slightly muted this morning. She was doing everything right. She was just not quite there behind it. When she came to refill his coffee, he said, without planning to, "Are you all right?" She looked at him. The question seemed to catch her off guard. Not because it was intrusive, but because it was direct. And most customers did not look directly at their servers when they asked how they were doing. "I am fine," she said. "Family stuff." He nodded and did not push. She topped off his cup and started to move away. Then she stopped and turned back, and he thought for a moment she was going to say something more. Instead, she just looked at him for a second with those steady brown eyes and said, "Thank you for asking. Most people do not." She walked away. Harrison sat with his coffee and felt the wall he had been building for 6 years develop a crack. So small it was almost nothing. Almost. He stayed an extra 20 minutes that morning. He told himself it was because the coffee was good. He left $100 under the mug outside on the sidewalk. He pulled out his phone and called Daniel and said, "I need you to find out what good pulmonologists are available in Chicago. The best ones. Have a list for me by end of day." Daniel paused for exactly 1 second, which was more surprise than he usually showed. "Of course," he said. "Any particular reason?" Harrison looked back through the glass at the woman in the red apron moving between tables like she had nowhere else in the world to be. "Research," he said, and started walking. Lora found out on a Friday she was sitting in the waiting room of the pulmonology clinic on Michigan Avenue, the one her father's regular doctor had referred them to after the second round of tests came back. It was a nicer office than she had expected, pale wood paneling and soft lighting, and a receptionist who spoke in a carefully measured voice. Lora had taken the morning off work, which meant losing 4 hours of tips, which she had calculated on the bus, and then stopped. Calculating because the number made her stomach hurt. The doctor was a tall woman named Dr. Patricia Holloway, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the particular manner of someone who delivered difficult news regularly and had learned to do it with steadiness rather than softness. She explained the treatment plan. She explained the medications. She explained the procedure they wanted to schedule within the next 6 weeks and what it would involve. Then she slid a folder across the desk with the estimated costs printed at the top of the first page. Lora looked at the number. She did not let her face change. She had practiced not letting her face change in difficult moments ever since. She was 15 and understood that falling apart in front of people who needed you was a luxury she could not afford. She nodded and asked 2 questions about the procedure itself and thanked Dr. Holloway and helped her father into his coat in the hallway, in the elevator, on the way down. Lora Vault put his arm around his daughter's shoulders and said, "We are not going to panic." "I am not panicking," Lora said. "You have that look. I do not have a look. You have had that look since you were 7 years old and you knocked over your mother's good lamp and tried to figure out how to fix it before she got home." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "You do not have to fix everything alone, Lori. She pressed her lips together and looked at the elevator doors, and said nothing because if she tried to speak right then, she was not certain. What would come out? She went back to work that afternoon for the dinner shift. Connie took one look at her and started making tea in the back without being asked, which meant she already knew something had happened. Lora tied her apron and went out to the Florin was perfectly competent for 4.5 hours and did not think about the number at the top of the page in the folder that was now sitting on the kitchen counter at home. She thought about it on the bus home. She was still thinking about it the next morning when she unlocked the front door of the Copper Spoon and found Harrison Blake already standing on the sidewalk outside. He was 12 minutes early, which had never happened before. He was wearing a dark coat and had his hands in his pockets, and he looked, for a moment when he did not know she was watching him from the other side of the glass, like a man carrying something heavy that he had been carrying for a long time. She unlocked the door and pushed it open. "You were early," she said. "I had a breakfast meeting that got canceled." She turned on the lights and started the coffee. He sat down in his usual seat. The diner was empty, the chairs still up on half the tables from the overnight cleaning. It was just the two of them and the sound of the coffee machine waking up. He watched her move through the opening routine. She did not perform it for him. That was the thing about Lora. She never performed anything. She did what needed to be done because it needed to be done, and she was simply present in it. "Can I ask you something?" He said. She was reaching up to bring down the mugs from the shelf. "Sure. What would you do if you were facing something you could not see your way through?" She stopped and turned to look at him. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the table in front of him, running his thumb along the edge of the mug she had already set down. "I would do the next small thing," she said. Whatever the next small thing was. Pay the next bill. Make the next phone call. Get through the next shift. And then the one after that. He was quiet. "And I would let people help me," she added. "That part I am still working on." Something crossed his face that she could not fully read. He nodded slowly and picked up the coffee she poured and wrapped, both hands around the mug, the way he always did when something was on his mind. She went back to opening the diner and did not ask him anything else. 3 days later, Daniel Frost called the clinic on Michigan Avenue. Harrison had not planned to do it the way he did it. He had not planned to do it at all, not consciously. But he had made the list of pulmonologists, as he told Daniel he would. And then he had kept thinking about the way Lora had looked that Friday morning. Not broken, never broken, but carrying something that was too heavy to be invisible. He had a particular skill for reading people under pressure, and what he saw in her was not despair, but the kind of exhaustion that comes from being strong. For too long, without anyone noticing, he had Daniel make some inquiries, carefully with specific instructions about discretion. He discovered that a patient matching a certain description had an upcoming procedure scheduled, and that the financial arrangement was incomplete. He made a call. He was very specific about how it was to be handled. An anonymous foundation contribution tied to a patient assistance program. Clean, untraceable, handled through the clinic's own administrative process. The kind of thing that wealthy people did quietly when they did not want. Gratitude, he had almost convinced himself. It would stay quiet. Connie Marsh was the one who told Lora. She came in on a Tuesday, waving her phone with the kind of energy she usually reserved for particularly dramatic sporting events. The clinic had called Lora Vault that morning. The balance had been cleared. A patient assistance grant, the administrator had said. Fully covered. Lora had gone very still in the middle of tying her apron. Connie was already 3 steps ahead. She had called her cousin who worked in hospital administration and asked some specific questions about how these things worked, and her cousin had explained that real patient assistance grants had a paper trail and an application process and took weeks. Connie had then done what Connie did best, which was talk to everyone until someone told her something useful. The clinic's billing coordinator had mentioned a foundation contribution. The foundation did not have a public website, but it had a registered agent, and Connie had found the name attached to the legal filing in under 20 minutes. Harrison Blake, she said, holding the phone out. Lora looked at the name on the screen for a long time. She untied her apron. Connie said. Lora. Cover the floor for me, Lora said. She walked out the front door still in her work clothes, the black non-slip shoes and the white shirt with the copper spoon embroidered on the chest, and she stood on the sidewalk and called the number she had for a man named Harry, who sat at the window seat and ordered the same breakfast every morning, and who she had known for 6 weeks was not who he said he was. He answered on the second ring. I need to talk to you. She said. I know, he said. His voice was very calm. She heard him say something to someone in the background, a brief word and then a door closing. Where are you? Outside the diner. Do not move. I will be there in 15 minutes. He was there in 11. He came on foot, which meant he had already been close. He came around the corner and stopped on the sidewalk in front of her, and they looked at each other for a moment without saying anything. He looked the way he always looked, composed, self-contained, only his eyes carrying something that his face was working not to show. You paid for my father's surgery, she said. Yes. Without telling me, yes. She crossed her arms. The wind off the lake was cutting, and she had not grabbed her coat. Why? He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that was not avoidance but thinking, the real kind. Because I could, he said finally. And because watching you carry it alone when you did not have to was something I found I could not keep doing. She looked at him. You do not even know me. I have been sitting at that table watching you for 6 weeks, he said. I know how you take your own coffee. I know you always give the last booth to whoever looks most tired because the cushion is better there. I know you called your father twice during the Saturday morning shift last week because he was not feeling well and you were worried, but you did not leave because you knew the diner was short-staffed. He paused. I know that you found out who I was within the first week, and you never said anything because you understood that I needed something that was not connected to any of. That Lora uncrossed her arms. His jaw tightened slightly. I am sorry I did it without asking you. I understand if that makes you angry. She was quiet for a long moment. A cab went past. Someone on the other side of the street was arguing with their umbrella in the wind. The ordinary city kept moving around them. It does make me angry, she said. Not because you did it. Because I did not have a way to do it myself. He looked at her and something in him seemed to shift. Something that had been held in position for a long time. Your name is not Harry, she said. No, Harrison, she said. She did not make it a question. Yes. She nodded slowly. She had known for 6 weeks, and saying it out loud still felt like something settling into its proper place. And everything they wrote about you? She said. The magazines. The company. All of it, he confirmed. She studied his face. He let her look, which she noticed. Most people tried to fill silence. He had learned to stand in it. Why did you not just tell me? Because every person who knows who I am wants something from it, he said. And I could not know whether you would be different until you were. She thought about that. Then she said, I am a waitress, Harrison. I do not want your money, or your connections, or anything you can build or buy. I was doing fine before you showed up. I know, he said quietly. That is not the point. Then what is the point? He looked at her with those green eyes that she had catalogued without meaning to, at every shift in them, every time they warmed or shuddered. You walked past me 4 times the first morning I came in, and you did not see me, he said. You were the first person in years who looked at me and only saw a person eating breakfast. I did not realize how much I needed that until it was in front of me. Lora felt something move in her chest. She kept her voice steady. You should have told me who you were. Yes, he said. I should have. I am telling you now. She looked down at the sidewalk for a moment. Then she said, My father is going to want to thank whoever paid for his surgery. He is stubborn about that kind of thing. Harrison said nothing, waiting. I am going to have to tell him. It was you, she said. And then he is going to want to meet you. And that is going to be a whole thing. Something happened to his face then. Not quite a smile, but the thing that lived just beneath one. It's a thing that was more honest than a smile because it was not performed. I can handle that, he said. She looked at him for a long, steady moment. He did not fidget or look away. She had noticed that about him in the very beginning. He had the rare quality of being fully present in the moment he was in, not thinking about the next meeting or the next deal or what impression he was making. He was just there in front of her, on a cold sidewalk in November. With his hands in his pockets and his expensive coat and the face that had been on 3 magazine covers, and that looked, right now, more uncertain than she had ever seen it. You are going to have to stop paying for things without asking me first, she said. Agreed, he said immediately. And I am not going to stop working at the diner. I would not ask you to. And you need to tell me things. Real things. Not just the window seat version of yourself. He was quiet for a second. That might take some time, he said. I am not particularly good at it, I noticed, she said. I am patient. The almost smile became something real then, slow and unguarded, and it changed his face entirely. She had wondered what he looked like when he actually smiled in the weeks of watching him. Now she knew. It turned out to be the most dangerous thing about him. She stuck out her hand. Hi, she said. I am Lora Vault. I am a waitress. My coffee is better than anything you have had in a hotel this week, and my father will absolutely grill you the first time he meets you. He looked at her hand and then at her face, and then he took her hand and shook it with the kind of grip that meant something. Harrison Blake, he said. I build things. I am apparently terrible at being a person, but I am working on it. She did not let go right away. Neither did he. Connie was watching. Through the glass of the diner with her chin in her hands and a look on, her face like someone who had just finished the last page of a very good book. She sighed loudly enough that 2 customers looked up from their meals. Inside, the coffee was still hot. Outside, the city kept moving. And on the corner of Wacker and Monroe, a woman who had never needed saving, and a man who had forgotten how to let anyone close, stood on the sidewalk with their hands still clasped and figured out, slowly and honestly, what it meant to begin. Roger Vault met Harrison 3 weeks later at a Sunday dinner in the small apartment on the south side. He made pot roast because it was what he made for important occasions. He asked Harrison for direct questions about his intentions, his character, and his views on people who inherited wealth versus people who built it. Harrison answered all 4 without flinching and passed the pot roast when asked, and helped clear the table without being told to. Afterward, Roger Vault found his daughter in the kitchen and said quietly, He looks at you the way your grandfather looked at your grandmother. Lora kept washing the dishes. I know, she said. Roger nodded and went back to the living room. Lora stood at the sink and let the warm water run over her hands and thought about a man who had walked into a diner on a cold morning expecting to be invisible and had instead found the one thing his money had never been able to manufacture. Someone who saw him for exactly what he was and chose to stay anyway. She turned off the water and dried her hands and went back out to the living room where Harrison was listening to her father describe the construction of a bridge he had worked on in 1987 with the complete attention of a man who had nowhere else in the world he would rather be. She sat down next to him. His hand found hers without looking, easy and certain, as if it had always known the way. Some things, she thought, do not need to start perfectly. They just need to start honestly, and then, one small thing at a time, they become something that lasts. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you've enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.